classification of, organisms and fossils. So it's talking clearly about genes here when it's talking about the ash trees. Now it says here, I'll skip down here. It says, with age, ash may change their sexual function from predominantly male and hermaphrodite towards femaleness. If grown as a ornamental and both sexes are present, ashes can cause a considerable litter problem with their seeds. Ornamental. So ornamental basically mean if you're going to grow the tree to look at, to just have, what happens is when you have male and female present, their offspring, the seeds, become toxic, become dangerous. So what happens is you start to see these holes, these spots appear on the leaves, and they basically destroy themselves and everything around them. So the seeds or the offspring of the male and female ash trees, the leaves being together, causes their seeds, their offspring, to be destructive and to destroy and kill. You get the hint? So plain and simple, when you look at this fact, why I said the ash tree and use that terminology to give you the same type of understanding. It's exactly what happened in the book of Enoch. You had the sons of God coming to the daughter of men. Their seeds were destructive. They killed. They basically destroyed themselves and everything around them. This is the analogy. This is what it's giving you, the whole parable about the ash tree, giving you the same thing here in Greek mythology. So it's basically the same thing that happened in the Bible with the sons of God coming into the daughters of men and them producing these beings that was evil, that was basically destroying everything. It's giving you that whole parable with the ash tree and basically what happens when male and female come together and the destruction that they create, or their seeds create, I should say. So in the book of Enoch, in the Bible, what happened to these evil races of men? God destroyed them with a flood. And when you read Apollodorus, Bibliothek, another Theogony, Greek mythology, the same thing happened to the people in the Bronze Age. They were destroyed with the flood. This is what Zeus did to them, and where we get the whole Deucalion and Pyrrha story with these evil men in the Bronze Age being destroyed with a flood. Clear as day, we can see the comparison with Greek mythology and biblical religion and see which one predated which, so we know where they got it from. So that's how basically the Bronze Age ended. You had so much death and destruction, war and everything, or what have you. And the Bronze Age ended with that flood. Then we have the Fourth Age, which would be the Age of Heroes, or also called the Mycenaean Age. This is where Zeus made the demigods, like Hercules or what have you, or Samson. And the demigods were basically the heroes out there, going out there and basically saving shit. So not going to get too much into the Age of Heroes. What basically end up happening is you have most of the heroes die. Trojan War and all kinds of wars. They was created by Zeus to basically go out and do a lot of different things to basically help people out. And, one of the ways to get into heaven or Elysium was to be a hero. And this is where most of them went, to the Elysium Isles or the Elysium Fields. And that's basically how the Age of Heroes ended. But I want to get into the fifth and final age, which is the Iron Age, the age that his side is in. So now it says, far seeing Zeus made another race, the fifth, who live now on the fertile earth. I wish I were not of this race, that I had died before or had not yet been born. This is the race of iron. Now, by day, men work and grieve unceasingly. By night, they waste away and die. The gods will give harsh burdens, but will mingle in some good. Zeus will destroy this race of mortal men when babies shall be born with graying hair. Father will have no common bond with son, neither will guest with host nor friend with friend. The brother love of past days will be gone. Men will dishonor parents who grow old too quickly and will blame and criticize with cruel words. Wretched and godless, they refusing to repay their bringing up will cheat their aged parents of their due. Men will destroy towns of other men. The just, the good, the men who kept his word will be despised, but men will praise the bad and insolent. Might will be right, and shame will cease to be. Men will do injury to better men by speaking crooked words and adding lying oaths. Now I'm going to skip down here. It says, but there are some who will till the fields of pride and work at evil deeds. Zeus marks them out, and often all the city suffers for their wicked schemes. And on these men from heaven, the son of Cronos sends great punishment, both plagues and famine, and the people die. Their wives are barren, and their villages dwindle according to the plan of Zeus. At other times, the son of Cronos will destroy their army, or will snatch away their city wall, or all their ships at sea. You lords take notice of this punishment. The deathless gods are never far away. They mark the crooked judges who grind down their fellow men and do not fear the gods. 3 times 10,000 watchers over men, immortal, roam the fertile earth for Zeus. Clothed in a mist, they visit every land and keep a watch on lawsuits and on crimes. One of them is the virgin born of Zeus, Justice, revered by all the Olympian gods. So now when you go on to finish reading about what happened during the Iron Age, you understand that this is where the gods leave Earth. They leave Earth, Zeus leaves, and he basically vows to come back and basically destroy, the race of men, destroy the people, or what have you. So this is basically how the Iron Age ends, with men being alone and the gods leaving and not communicating with the people. And this is where, we basically are. And this is where Hesiod is basically speaking about what has happened in the ages that came before. Now, when you pay attention with Zeus, you can just see, one, how he is exactly like the God of the Bible, does good things, does bad things, evil stuff. You can see how these people, the Greek gods, have sort of emotions like men. It's the same thing with God, jealousy and rage or what have you. And you can see how, it's bad things that happen to the regular people. Same thing in the Bible. And when you just keep on reading the stories and understanding how you can compare them to Greek mythology, it's crazy. It's so easy to do so, to compare them, because a lot of the stuff just fits. The terminology, the wording is exactly the same in Greek mythology as it is in the Bible. So we know we have heaven and hell. You have Hades, you have Elysium. So remember in Elysium being like heaven, just like in the movie, Elysium was beautiful. And this is where like rich people live, and, you had to be selected to get up there or what have you. It's the same thing. Elysium was basically heaven. And a lot of scholars, all of the people who I listed before, all of the scholars all wrote about Elysium and about what it was. So now this is what Pindar had to say. This is Pindar Odes. For those living a righteous life, the good receive a life free from toil, not scraping with the strength of their arms the earth, nor the water of the sea, for the sake of a poor sustenance. But in the presence of the honored gods, those who gladly kept their oaths enjoy a life without tears, while the others undergo a toil that is unbearable to look at. Those who have persevered 3 times on either side to keep their souls free from all wrongdoing follow Zeus's road to the end, to the tower of Cronos, where ocean's breeze blow around the island of the blessed, and flowers of gold are blazing, some from splendid trees on land, while water nurtures others. With these wreaths and garlands of flowers they entwine their hands according to the righteous counsel of Rhadamanthus, whom the great father, the husband of Re, whose throne is above all others, keeps close beside him as his partner. That is from the Odes of Pindar. Now, when you pay attention to Greek mythology, you have some scholars who write Cronos being the god, the ruler of the underworld. But Rhadamanthus basically roams the underworld and roams Elysium, I should say, but he is a judge of the underworld. Rhadamanthus, his name translates to soothsayer, to a person who conquers, one who conquers or what have you. So Rhadamanthus is also put there in Elysium. He is the son of Zeus in Europa. Remember, Europa is where Europe comes from. Now, according to a lot of Greek scholars, a lot of Greeks who wrote about Elysium was actually on Earth. It was supposed to be at the far western edge for all you flat earthers, edge of the planet, of the Earth. So now this is what Plutarch had to say about Elysium. Now I'm going to read this briefly. Plutarch says, these are two in number, separated by a very narrow strait. They are 10,000 furlongs distance from Africa and are called the Islands of the Blessed. Now this is what Diodorus said. Diodorus, in his first book, suggested that the Elysian fields, which were much celebrated by Grecian poetry, corresponded to the beautiful plains in the neighborhood of Memphis, which contained the tombs of that capital city of Egypt. He further intimated that the Greek prophet Orpheus composed his fable about the afterlife when he traveled to Egypt and saw the customs of the Egyptians regarding the rites of the dead. Now, Diodorus' first book, Library of History, Book 1. So now, when you look at the synopsis, it's saying here, Egypt, the origin of the world and of civilized life. The gods, the first men. Egypt, the land, the Nile, and its flooding. Egypt, the first kings. Egypt, customs and religion. This is why I tell people to follow Diodorus, because when you understand what he wrote in his writings, he basically is one of the only Greek scholars besides Herodotus who a lot of people distort his work, who basically was giving it to you straight up, was telling you that, the Greeks basically, when you pay attention, is taking this stuff from ancient Egypt and repurposing it for their own gain, for their own benefit. So when you get into a lot of his work, he goes into what the ancient Egyptians was talking about. Now, let me point something out because you're going to get confused, a lot of people. All of this stuff. And this is going to sound crazy. It's going to make a lot of people skeptical and doubtful. But you got to understand, you can't trust none of this stuff. You have to go into every single bit of all of these scholars and their work and think about it and say, well, possibly somebody came in there and changed what was said or took out or added some things to a lot of the works. It's very tough. This is why you got to keep doing research and keep looking before you just accept what they were saying, because a lot of stuff possibly was changed. But when you can find what these people are talking about from multiple scholars and find actual facts and proof to back up what they were speaking to, then you can rely on a lot of these scholars more so. This is what I have found to be true with Diodorus and with Herodotus, which I know a lot of people say Herodotus is not proven true, but a lot of stuff that's important, his works is proven. So I pay attention to these Greek scholars because a lot of them really put out this information, because what you got to understand was everybody wasn't in agreement on what happened, plain and simple. And you had a lot of people who started to understand the spirituality of the ancient Egyptians and what they was doing and how all that was taken away. And a lot of people didn't have faith in the direction that the Greeks was headed. But when you take a step back and look at it all again, we see this stuff dealing with the same things we see in biblical religion. We look at Egyptian mythology and we see it's talking about the same things. Corresponding with Greek mythology, or Greek mythology corresponding with Egyptian mythology. All this stuff is talking about the same stuff. And as we understand it, going back to energy, vibration, frequency, and what have you, when you get really deep into it. So we see clearly in Greek mythology that they're talking about the planet Saturn. We see clearly that the moons of Saturn are named after Greek gods. All of this is pointing to Saturn. Again, when you start getting into this stuff, it's a reason this stuff is corresponding with these things. And when you get deeper into it, you start to understand what they're talking about, as we'll get into down the line. But suffice it to say that when you look at Egyptian mythology, that they are speaking about Saturn as well. And then, of course, they're not going to go and name it as Saturn. But since we understand that Greek mythology took from Egyptian mythology, we can look at it and say that they were speaking about the same thing. So, as I said before, when the Egyptians are referring to the sun, I believe they're talking about Saturn as a sun and not about the sun we see when we wake up in the morning. Everything, all the aspects that they're speaking about fits Saturn being the sun and not our sun being what they're talking about, because our sun does not have an eye. Our sun does not fit with the description of the, the pineal gland and what everything is speaking to, as far as the Saturn looking like an eye and it having all the characteristics that fit Saturn that does not fit our sun. So clearly it's talking about Saturn. And don't get me wrong, you have the ancient Egyptians, of course, referring to the sun that we see today as well. You just have to understand when they're talking about what. Now, it's going to make a lot more sense when we get down the line and start talking about this more. But now remember, I talked about in Ancient History, Volume 1, the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians' land being part of the Egyptian Empire. And you got to remember the Phoenicians worshipped El, so did the Canaanites. So when we find El, we know we're talking about the Phoenicians, we know we're talking about the Canaanites or the Phoenician Canaanites, and we know El to be Saturn. Now, what they'll tell you when you look and you start digging and doing this research, that another name for El was Elah, I-L-A, Elah. And again, this is why I tell you, do your own research. Don't pay attention to what these people say unless it fits, unless you can really get proof for it. Now, Elah wasn't another name for El. Elah was the moon. Elah is the moon god. This is what it's referring to. See, it says a rare spelling, Elah. No, it's talking about a moon god, the moon god. So we can also find Elah in Hinduism. So Elah in Hinduism is the progenitor of the lunar dynasty. So what is the lunar dynasty? It says lunar dynasty. In Hindu mythology, the lunar dynasty is one of the 4 principal houses of the Kshatriya Varna, or warrior ruling caste. This legendary dynasty was descended from the moon, while the other principal houses, the solar dynasty, claims descent from the sun. Then it says here Soria, or Sora, Soras. What are we talking about here? We're talking about Islam. So let's go back to Elah and understand what Elah in Hinduism, Elah can change from male to female and vice versa. So it says here, as a woman, Elah married Buddha, the god of the planet Mercury and the son of the lunar deity Kshatriya, which Kshatriya means moon god. So Elah married Buddha, or Buddha Graha, which Buddha Graha is the god of Mercury. Now it says here, Buddha in Punic mythology is also a deity. He is also known as Soumya, son of the moon. So what these researchers have not put together or are not telling you is you have El, Saturn god, the god of Saturn, and Elah, Elah, which they changed to Al-Elah. Now the thing is, when people start seeing this Elah, they started separating it, which they should, as the moon god. But when they seen it in reference with El, they figured it was another name for El, knowing that it had to deal with the moon. There's no way you can separate the two. You can't see Elah and think it's another name for El, which is why I don't know why they put that there. But Elah is the moon. So you have Elah, and what they don't understand that the ancients had already figured out was the connection between the moon and the planet Saturn. So what El-Elah became Al-Elah, and so on and so forth. Alat, Al-Uzza, Manat, daughters of the moon god Sin, whatever you want to do to break it up, to make it fit. It's going to correspond with the moon. And of course, you have a lot of people in the Muslim faith, Islamic faith, that can't accept that their religion is based off moon worship. But when you go back and do the research, that's all they did back in ancient Mesopotamia. Remember, Sir Leonard Woolley was the one who had found one of the largest temples of the moon in Mesopotamia. So they found all of these artifacts. This is where they found the statues with the dudes sitting down with the moon symbol on their chest. I mean, look at this stuff. There was finding this stuff all over the so-called Middle East. Worship of the moon. Look at the hands, the way the hands are together, like the prayer we see in Islam today. This is where the stuff comes from. It's ancient. It predates Islam. The stuff was found in the Chaldees. Remember, they found the stelas. Remember, it has the moon symbol on the stela. They've been finding temples of the moon throughout the Middle East for years. It's a bunch of them. They exist. They have existed for a long time, because you had, for a time, as I talked about before, there was a time before the moon, before Earth actually had a moon, that so many ancient civilizations talked about. We know at the top of a mosque, they have the crescent moon. We know that they use a lunar calendar. We know that the new moon marks the first day of Ramadan. So we can find the moon in Islam easy, clear as day. Now, it's the star part that people get confused about. What is the star? The star is clearly Saturn, plain and simple. So this is what it's talking about when it says El-Ilah. Elah, the moon god. El, Saturn. So we see them with the crescent moon. We see them walking around the Kaaba, which is the black square symbolizing the planet Saturn. And this is what it's going back to. We can see it clear as day. You have Saturn, you have the moon, you have El, you have Elah. Clear as day. So as I said, the ancients, they remember there was a time before the moon. And as many people have talked about, as far as Saturn putting out this frequency and vibration and the moon picking it up, it's a reason why they coupled Saturn and the moon. So a lot of people will tell you, researchers will say, well, they believe that's where it came from. Remember, who built the moon? If you read the book, where did it come from? And you have these civilizations speaking about a time before the moon. This is what they talked about. So you can imagine, as I said, the moon just appearing, there had to be a major event for these people. And all kinds of, temples and monuments went up to the moon who just, appeared. And this is what El-Ilah is. They put them together. El-Ilah. So you have Isis, the moon, Ra, the sun, El, Saturn, Israel. It's just that simple. So when you look at these stelas and carvings, that's exactly what it's saying. You have the two suns and you have the moon. So they're telling you one sun, Saturn, which was a sun, and the moon. A lot of people look at these depictions and they wasn't able to put it together of what they mean. There's two suns up there. Clearly that's a sun symbol. Why is it two? There's two. And you can see the one with the waves symbolizing Saturn, as I talked about before in previous videos. So you have these ancients back then marking Saturn, the sun, and the moon. El-Ilah or Israel. Plain and simple. And the stuff, it goes back far when you pay attention and look. And in none of this stuff can we find anything alluding to, this, what they believe Islam to be. It's the moon. It's the moon. It's just tough. And it's crazy that we have all of this death and destruction because people refuse to read. People refuse to do research and to look at where this stuff truly come from. And it could be found within their own history, their own ancient history. I mean, they can walk around there in Mesopotamia and Iraq and find these temples with the worship of the moon. But a lot of them find this stuff and they have no knowledge. So they automatically believe it goes back to Islam when it goes back to moon worship. Worship in the time when the moon came into existence from the planet Saturn. When you look at the stones and look at the facts, they put all three. This is exactly what they're telling you. So now in the Greek mythology, of course, you have the same thing. You have moon worship. You have multiple moon gods and goddesses. So you have Selene. Selene would be the Roman Luna dealing with the moon. Now Selene is sister to Eos and Helios, which we know Eos is the goddess of the dawn or the daylight or the sunrise. And Helios, of course, the god of the sun. So we find in Greek mythology, long before Islam, here you have the moon, you have the sun. Plain and simple. Put them together. So we're talking about the same thing, talking about the same stuff. You're going to find, as I said before, with all of these religions going across the world, ancient and present, going back to ancient Kemet, going back to the same stuff. Now, our modern day religions, the main three stem from the Greeks. The Greeks were the only ones that was, closest to Kemet to get this kind of knowledge. And we know that in Heliopolis, which is in Egypt, you had the temple of the sun or the temple of the phoenix in Heliopolis, where the Greeks came in and studied with the masters, the grand masters of ancient Kemet, the ones who basically taught at the mystery schools. They went to Heliopolis. When you look at the glyph for Heliopolis and the Temple of the Phoenix or the Sun, this is what it looks like. And you can clearly see you have that cross at the top. You start breaking this stuff down and getting into it, you can't escape the facts. The stuff is so blatant, it's so obvious, it's not hidden. They just know you won't look. And even if you look and find it, so what? It means nothing to them. They are in power. The people who taught at the ancient Egyptian mystery schools were the real Masons, the real Grand Masters, the people who had the real knowledge. They was almost equivalent to the pharaohs themselves. They was right below them. These were who the pharaohs looked to. These dudes had all the knowledge. Plain and simple. Of course, the pharaohs did as well. You know, and you had the Greeks come in and learn and get this knowledge and get this information and begin to apply it to their civilization and begin to do exactly what the ancient Egyptians did as far as make up Greek mythology and deify things and create these deities and gods to basically hide math, science, astrology, or what have you. This is what they did. So, of course, once they got to a point where they realized that the spirituality involved in what the ancient Egyptians was trying to do, they did not want to accomplish. Their goal was strictly material and to stick with the materialistic world. So they let Egypt be buried in sand and they wanted to completely forget about it. They took all the manuscripts, they took all of the information, and whether they kept it or not, whether it all burned in the Library of Alexandria or not, they was content with the outcome because they had enough information to do what they want. They didn't care about the gold, the diamonds, the jewels, or what have you, all that stuff that's still under the sand, all of the stuff that was uncovered later on. As I said before, they didn't worry about that because they already had more than enough information to execute their agenda. And we are here today bearing witness to them executing their agenda still to this day. Now, I don't think people realize how much Greek mythology is in so much of our everyday life, how in almost every movie that has to do with any kind of fantasy or what have you, you are dealing with stuff that we can find in Greek mythology. It's just that simple. Now, I talked about before how we can look at the Marvel universe and how Marvel was based off of ancient Kemet. Stanley said it out his own mouth. Now, when you look at those old Marvel characters, it's clear as day. You can clearly see they come from Kemet. So you had Marvel, which basically dealt with Egyptian mythology. You mix in a little bit of Norse legends and other stuff within Marvel, and that was Marvel. So you have Marvel dealing with Egyptian mythology, and you go to DC. DC clearly dealing with Greek mythology. You have Greek mythology in Aquaman. You have Greek mythology in Captain Marvel, and of course, Wonder Woman. Now, the Wonder Woman movie, I believe it just came out on Blu-ray. It was in the movies not too long ago. And clear as day, if you've seen the movie, it's basically right out of the comics, plain and simple. They did Wonder Woman in the movies exactly out of All-Star comic number 8, which is the first appearance of Wonder Woman. In All-Star comic number 8, we first get Wonder Woman, and you can see here clear as day, this is exactly how it starts in the comic. It's the same way it was in the movie, but the plane crash and her finding him in the water or what have you. Same stuff. So now, what is Wonder Woman's real name? Diana. So some of you already know what I'm going to say. Some of you are already like, oh shit. Diana. Who is Diana? What does her name mean? Now, in the comic book, it says clearly, she's going to be named after her grandmother, who was the goddess of the moon. Goddess of the moon. Look at her outfit. You got the moon, one, her name, Diana, goddess of the moon. Her outfit, you had the stars. So you have the moon, you have the stars. You look at her forehead. You look at the crown thing that she wears on her head. You have the sun symbol there, representing the star or the sun. Wonder Woman is giving you the planet Saturn. It's clear as day. It's giving you Greek mythology, even more clearer. Talk about the same stuff. Diana is the Roman and Greek goddess of the moon. If you remember in the movie, who did she fight in the movie? She fought Ares, the god of war. Ares. The whole movie dealt with Zeus and Ares and Greek mythology and everything like that. The Amazons, all that stuff. Greek mythology. It's giving it to you right there. Look at the shield that has the star. She has the star and the crescent, star and the moon. Her name is the moon. So we find this stuff in so many different things. It's always going back to Greek mythology. And the point I want you to get in this first part, because there's so much more we're going to get into in this series. So you can see clearly, one, what the Greeks have done and what they're doing, what they have shown us so far, which is crazy. So much that they put out there. But if you don't get this prerequisite and understand this stuff first, it's not going to make sense later. Trust me. I'm going to put it together so you can really get this stuff. But the Greeks had so much to do with, of course, our civilization and how things unfolded, after Kemet fell and after they took over. And we see it everywhere. We see it in so many places. And, once I start really getting into the information, I start picking up on so many different things and looking at so many different shows and seeing Greek mythology all over the place. It's everywhere. Now, the thing is, a lot of this stuff probably has been brought to some religious people's attention, but not so much in detail. But a lot of people, again, because we have seen Greek mythology so many different times, we have been taught about Greek mythology in school, but not in depth. And a lot of people just write it off. It can't be Greek mythology now, because they wouldn't have told us about it. But it's Greek mythology. You go back and you put it all together. You look at the fact that we get the inception of biblical religion from the Greeks. They wrote both books, Old Testament, New Testament. Torah, Bible, written in Greek first, then translated into Latin, which the Romans held on to it in Latin for a long time. But all the ancient manuscripts are all in Greek. Not a coincidence.